Welcome to Under the Skin, Jay Shetty. Jay and I have been friends for a long while now. Many of you will already be familiar with Jay because of his excellent motivational and developmental videos on Facebook and YouTube. Jay, thanks for coming on Under the Skin to talk with us.
Oh no, Russell, thank you for having me here. I'm grateful to be with you.
Good. I always enjoy your company. Now, I had a wonderful experience. I'm good friends with the American actor, film star, writer, Jason Segel. And recently he sent me a video that said, check this out, right? And it was your video where it's the guys in the airport sharing the cookies. Will you talk us through the narrative of that video just so people that have not seen this video get a flavour of what it's about?
Yes, absolutely. And I had no idea that he had seen it. So that makes
yeah, he was well into it. I mean, it's one of those things he sent to me. Now, it's interesting for me when I'm friends with somebody and then people, you know, independently send me. I've obviously known about you and your stuff for a while now, but like Jason sent me that and I was like, oh, wow, everything's starting to connect, I felt.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really happy to hear that. So yeah, that video was me looking at how we instantly judge or create impressions on something without thought. So we're so used to in our life having instant judgment, defining a moment and giving it a label, good or bad, in the moment. And I thought, how do I present a concept to the world where we can laugh at ourselves and realize that sometimes our instant judgment or our instant labeling processor isn't always correct?
Yes.
How do we get that? So this script or narrative that I shared in this video is on a gentleman who goes to buy these cookies because he feels like having a few cookies because his flight's delayed, and he sits down to eat these cookies, and the gentleman opposite him, where you're sitting right now, starts to take cookies out as well. And he's thinking, how's this guy? And the guy looks a little rugged, he looks a little scruffy, he doesn't look put together. So naturally all of our biases, our unconscious biases start coming up and stemming up. And we start thinking, oh, he looks a little shady. Or maybe he doesn't have money, that's why he's taking my cookies. And we have this impression of I, me, and mine. These are my cookies. How can he take them? Only to realize when he leaves that your cookie box was in your bag and that gentleman was sharing his cookies with you. And then this person has this epiphany or this moment of realizing how quick he was to judge, but how wrong he was. And I think all of us in different ways have different moments in our life where whether we misjudged a person the first time we met them, or we misjudged someone because of the first thing they said to us, or we had a friend that now is our best friend, but our first impression was, oh, they're a loser. And all of a sudden now we think they're amazing.
And even if it isn't a self-contained story, as in your rather lovely modern parable of the airport cookies, it may be that in time you would learn, oh no, this person did, like even say the guy had been taking the cookies and they were the protagonist's cookies. Maybe in the future you would learn things about a person that would make that entirely acceptable.
Absolutely.
Kind of everything that everyone does kind of makes sense when you know enough about them kind of idea.
Totally.
Jason sent me that. He really enjoyed it, obviously, and I got a kick out of it. And then we joked for ages about, why are these two grown-ass men sat in the airport eating cookies? 4 or 5 cookies each. Like, I mean, I cut myself off at 3 cookies. That's it. Anyone that's having more than that, you're going back for more cookies.
I think it came from my addiction to chocolate.
Clearly.
Yeah, I think that was me.
That's what you were expressing. That's what was coming out through that. How did you come up with the idea to present your idea of acceptance and challenging your own biases and tendency to judge through this simple motif of the mistake around the cookies? How did you come up with that idea?
Yeah, so all of my videos are based on 3 key elements. So every one of my videos is based on a scientific piece of research or a study. So sometimes I'll read a study and it will share a fascinating point about human behavior, the human mind, and how we make decisions. And I remember at the time, and this was a while ago before I made the video, but I read a study which was talking about how we like to judge and label every moment and every event in our life. So we say things like, I'm having a bad day.
Right.
And you might have just had a bad minute, but you said you had a bad day. Or you say, I'm having a bad year, when actually you just had a bad month. And so we have this ability, and it's a high volume frequency in our lives, where we're always judging moments, days, etc. So that's where that study planted the seed in my mind. And then I was speaking to my friends. So the second element I have in all of my videos is I try and find a reference of that study in my real life experience. So when I'm sitting with a friend and they're complaining or they're bringing out one of their points of challenges or problems that they're experiencing. So I remember a lot of friends were saying that they feel that they are too quick to judge, and that people need to be given a benefit of the doubt, and we need to be a bit more open. So that's where the real life experience came in. And the third thing is I try and give a piece of wisdom that I learned as a monk, or a piece of wisdom that I believe is timeless. And one of my favorite thoughts from Martin Luther King is, if you want a new idea, read an old book. And so I really try and find a lot of my ideas or values or principles that I'm sharing in my videos from timeless wisdom, or wisdom that I believe is universally acceptable and has a timeless voice. So those are kind of like the three elements of every video I make. And
what old books?
Many different ones. The Bhagavad Gita is probably one of my favorite books. It's been such a huge part of my personal journey and personal life. Many other religious texts as well. So the Bible's been a big part of my study. Spent a lot of time with the Bible. And then it can just be thoughts and ideas, even of the last 2,000 years. So Stoicism, a huge fan of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. That's been a huge book for me that I've studied. And sometimes old can just mean 50 years or 100 years ago too. But those are some of the bigger ideas that I think have had more prominent effects in my life. So Vedic and Stoic knowledge has probably been the most influential.
That's interesting. When did you start becoming interested in these ideas? Where are you from, mate, and stuff?
So I'm from London. I grew up in a place called Wood Green in North London. And my background's very much, my parents practiced certain religious rituals, but not religious in the overall sense. I grew up eating meat and
Hindus or what?
Hindus, yeah. My parents are from a Hindu background.
But
Hindu
they do
religion.
eat meat and stuff, so
Yeah, not anymore. They used to. So I grew up in a meat-eating household, and
in Wood Green,
In
you're
Wood
eating
Green.
meat.
yeah, in eating meat. Yeah, and just
You're basically animals.
I was basically an animal in Wood Green. Yeah, and then growing up as a typical North Londoner and not really having any interest in anything apart from money, the opposite sex, and pleasure, I guess, not even happiness, just pleasure. But then I really started to get fascinated in my teens. My father became very spiritual when I was 10 years old, and I actually saw that as very weird because
Why did he do that?
I think he went through, now when I look back on hindsight, he went through his sort of like midlife crisis journey search at the age of 40, where he was married, had 2 kids, had a decent job in the city, but didn't feel satisfied and didn't feel fulfilled. And so he went off, and I was 10 years old. He went on his search. So he went from everything from Reiki and healing to Church of Scientology through to all the religious truths, and was just searching for answers. And when he did that, that was actually quite alien and weird for me and my family, because we thought, oh, he's just gone mad. Because I guess it was my first experience of what a midlife crisis or midlife journey looks like. So that actually deterred me from spirituality, because it was almost like he was letting the family down, and it was tough for my mum and all the rest of it. So that was kind of how my teens was spent. But then I got fascinated by it because I remember it was one Christmas, and we used to celebrate Christmas every year. We used to wrap presents, have a Christmas tree. And one year I just felt like a hypocrite. I was just like, I don't know anything about Jesus, and I don't know much about Christianity. I was about 15 years old. And I was like, but we celebrate Christmas. Like, why do we celebrate Christmas? So then I remember I went to church that year on Christmas Day and Christmas Eve, just because I felt like a hypocrite, and I felt that I should at least understand or try and take an interest in what I was doing. And that really opened it up. At the same time, I was trying to date this Muslim girl in London, and she told me that if I didn't read the Quran, I couldn't date her. And so I remember just wanting to be with this girl and going, okay, I'm going to read the Quran if that's what it takes. So I read the Quran just so that I could talk to this girl about what was in the Quran. And it was really fascinating how I was reading all these books out of so I was reading about Christianity out of guilt. I was reading about the Quran out of lust. And then I started reading the Bhagavad Gita, because that was the book my dad told me to read, and that was more natural in my tradition. So I thought, okay, let me pick that book up as well. And so that's kind of how I got fascinated by all of it.
So you're a teenage kid. You're learning about Krishna consciousness because your dad's midlife crisis, mental breakdown or mental breakthrough, depending on how you see it.
Breakthrough.
Gives you an insight into that. You are interested in Christianity because the secular culture that you grew up is resourced from Christianity, and you just became curious. The Quran because you fancied a Muslim girl. So... wow, so you were brought into it by sort of the most peculiar, like, so, and with these first brushes with these religious or spiritual texts, what was your how was your curiosity rewarded? Was it, or what did you find in there then? Can you still recall?
Yeah, I think on a personal level, I valued deep thought because I loved rap music. So I used to listen to a lot of rap music growing up. And so people like Tupac, Eminem, Nas, etc., their lyrical abilities and their lyrical expression was a huge part of me growing up. And I used to spend a lot of time writing lyrics myself and playing with words. And I always enjoyed expressing things through poetry or spoken word. And when I read these books, a lot of them felt like poetry and spoken word. There were a lot of, not just rhyme, but there was a lot of creative expression there. So I almost was very interested or intrigued because of the way the philosophy was being communicated. But I wouldn't say I was looking for it or seeking or any of that sort. I was just like, oh, this is impressive. This is interesting thought. Maybe I can apply it in my music, or maybe I can use it here. It was less about the search for knowledge or wisdom. It was more about, oh, this could be cool to talk about here, or this would be interesting to extract from.
And when did it begin to change? When did your attitude towards theological texts or great spiritual works change from a kind of utilitarian curiosity that it could be magpied into hold on a minute, there's something in here that's going to alter me?
So I think the big thing for me was the first time I met a monk. And it's something that you can't ask someone like, oh, when was the first time you met a monk?
My first monk. God, I was just a slip of a girl then, back in Kent, picking apples on the coast. No, so tell me, what was your first experience?
So I remember I was around 18 years old, and I found out from a friend that this monk had been invited to speak at a university. And I was pretty uninterested to go. I wasn't really fascinated by it, and I actually remember saying to my friend, as long as we go out afterwards, I'll turn up to the event. So if we go to a bar afterwards,
as usual, dragged even to the feet of a monk by lust.
Yeah, literally. And so he said, yeah, I promise you. And he was getting into spirituality and interested by these things. So I went along, and I was captivated.
Who was it?
So this man's name is Gauranga Das. He lives in India. I think you might have met him at the Eco Village. So he built the Eco Village. So you might have met him when you went there.
In Mumbai, the Krishna Consciousness Eco Village, where it's like 100% carbon footprint free. They grow their own fruit and veg using, let's face it, human poo. like it's there's animals there. They're growing plants.
Fragrant flowers.
It's sort of amazing place. It's sort of beautiful, isn't it?
It is.
I expect you're like me, thinking, what systems could we replicate in order to save the world?
Absolutely.
And that seems like one. So you met,
I met him.
What's his name again?
Gauranga.
Gauranga.
So he was speaking, and just to put it in context for everyone listening, this man is Indian. He has a strong Indian accent. He's not necessarily externally attractive to the kind of person I'd be attracted to. At that time, I was attracted to
Tupac.
Yeah, exactly.
And women.
Right. And rags to riches stories. I loved celebrities and influencers and people who'd made money. Like, that's who I looked up to. People who'd gone from nothing to something. And then I'm here listening to this man wearing robes, and I'm totally captivated. I'm just like, wow, he's so fascinating. And the reason that he was fascinating is because he was talking about selfless service. And he talked about how real meaning, real happiness, real fulfillment from life comes when you're able to plant trees under whose shade you do not plan to sit. So you want to give shelter to others. You want to provide things for others without expecting something back from them. And at that time, that idea just penetrated through my whole being.
Why, when it's directly contradictory to your experience up to that point, why is this message relevant?
So I think two things. One thing is I was looking for a thrill in my teens, and that's when I was getting involved in all sorts of wrong ideas, wrong activities, or wrong in the sense of things that we wouldn't recommend or want our children to get involved in.
Drugs, sex, fighting?
Totally, yeah, all of that. Violence, petty theft, all that kind of stuff. And I wasn't doing it because I wanted stuff. I was doing it because I wanted a thrill in life. And when I saw him and saw the way he was living, he had made that process thrilling. Like, he looked happy. He looked more happy, more content, more fulfilled than anyone I'd ever seen. On top of that, he was extremely charismatic. And I just thought, I want to get to know this man. And then I found out that he'd given up jobs at some of the biggest companies in the world. And he went to IIT and had studied at IIT, which is the MIT of India, the Indian Institute of Technology. He was like a gold medalist at this place. And he'd given that all up to be a monk, to serve humanity. And I thought, wow, that's unbelievable, because he's given up everything that everyone that I know is chasing, but he's happy and he's found meaning and he's found that fulfillment that I feel is just emanating from who he is. So it was the first time in my life where I'd gone from not looking up to someone who went from nothing to something, but someone who'd gone from something to nothing. And that was a massive paradigm shift moment for me, and a massive moment of just, wow, there is more out there. And I constantly say this, and I say it often, it's, you can't be what you can't see. I would not have wanted to be a monk if I didn't see a monk who was fulfilled and happy and had this power about him. And up until that point, anyone that I'd seen that was rich or successful or beautiful or had a beautiful looking model girlfriend or whatever it was, they still didn't emanate that happiness for me. So I saw that very early on, not in the extreme sense. I didn't have celebrity friends or anything, but from what I saw, I could very clearly see that material things weren't making people deeply happy. And he was someone who had given that up and seemed happy to me.
Do you think everybody sees this? Do you think everybody knows this? I suppose we can infer from our culture that generally people don't. I mean, there's a growing interest in reframed, repackaged, retold spiritual stories. I think much of your success is because you're finding ways to convey these narratives that are appealing, not esoteric, not covered in dust, situated in recognizable airports, except for who eats that many cookies in the middle of the day, only a sick food addict. People, all of us have that craving, and I obviously recognize it myself. I recognize that it seems to have taken me longer than you, for one thing, and it seems to have required more extreme examples and more extreme personal experience. I don't know, because I don't know what your life's like. In fact, let me find out a little more. So this period, like, you're growing up in Wood Green, your dad's having sort of like, becoming curious about spirituality because of his, like, an experience I identify with, because I feel like I've had a kind of version of it, a kind of mental breakdown, or
breakthrough. I love
breakthrough. Let's do breakthrough, and then But what you're doing, so you're hanging out in Wood Green, going out in fast cars, trying to pick up girls, maybe having a fight, doing little bits of coke and stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. You just summed it up. I was just an experimenter growing up. I guess coming from an Indian household, my parents are fairly more liberal than traditional. But Indian traditions of protection are still there. Like, don't have a girlfriend, just be good at school. Like, that's the Indian moment. For a young man, it's like, don't have a girlfriend.
There's some Indian men outside, they're nodding. They're like, yeah, that's the deal. Yeah. Be good at school.
Yeah, be good, but get good grades. And it was get good grades, don't have a girlfriend, and don't think about anything else apart from getting good grades, because life's just about getting good grades, getting a good job, and then figuring out the rest of it.
Is your Indianness important in this country? Did you feel like being not a white person does that affect you?
It's really interesting. I try and look back on it a lot now because of what's being talked about now, but I never felt that way. I personally never felt it. Maybe there was a little racism when I was under 10 or whatever it was, but nothing enough for me to kick up a fuss about or feel different. I've always felt happy in Britain and wherever I am, for that matter. I've never really felt held back by my background or ethnicity. And there's always tiny moments in everyone's life where you may get bullied or someone may call you something that you don't want to be called, etc. But race is not the only one.
I suppose because, like what you said about not labeling a bad day on account of a bad minute, maybe you don't look especially to belong to stories about race, because yes. I suppose according to your you can't be what you can't see motif, that if you allow us to be determined by those kind of divisive ideologies, whether you're the victim or the perpetrator, it kind of suggests a realness to that separation that's hard for us to overcome, whether we're whatever ethnic origin we have.
Yes, absolutely. And my parents never let me feel it either. So my parents never built that story in my mindset that we were disadvantaged because of anything. And I think that was very prominent for me, that my parents never let me feel I had a disadvantage because of my background or ethnicity or anything for that matter. I was obese growing up, and that wasn't a disadvantage.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that before.
Yes, yeah.
I'd like to see a photograph, because people that are just listening to the podcast won't know that Jay is ridiculously handsome. He's got the eyes of Christ and a sort of haircut out of, I'm not sure which member of the band Harry Styles used to be in, possibly Zayn, but it could be one of the others. So that's what Jay looks like now. But I was a tubby kid myself.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that either. I've not seen those.
My God, from 11 to 15, I was sort of insulated in sort of chubbiness.
Oh wow! I
right
had no
through
idea.
puberty, people used to think I was like a chubby little girl.
Yeah, mine was from like 7 to 15.
17. It's not a good time
It's
to
not
go
a good-
chubby, is it?
No, definitely not. Definitely. Well, it was good. It
Go
was,
on.
I think it was good for me because I remember, and this is like one of those moments, I remember being 10 years old in the school playground. The cutest girl at school had just found out that I fancied her, like every other guy at school liked her. And I remember a group of girls standing behind me in the playground, just taking the mick out of me and taking the fun out of me, saying, oh, how can Jay think that he could be with her because he's so ugly and fat and all the rest of it. And I look back at that and I'm so happy it happened because I think it's let me be more compassionate, let me be more empathetic, it's let me not be egotistical. It's humbled me and made me more grateful and realize how much hard work it is being any different any way that we are, and so more accepting of reality. So I'm not upset about it at all. It's something that I think helped me.
But at the time you felt ashamed and diminished and worthless.
I did, not because of my weight, just because of how I was hearing that and how I was being treated. So yeah, definitely, naturally.
It's interesting to try and find an identity from that point, and I think natural to try to cultivate something that feels distinct from it, isn't it? If you're like a fat little kid, you think I'd like to be glamorous now.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think my thing was music. I really enjoyed music, and so that was my outlet, and that's what I used to profess as to who I was, etc., and define my identity through.
And yet, some point during this, the keen-eared listeners will have noted that you become a monk all of a sudden. So presumably, this is after your experience with, is it Garanga?
Yes.
Like this. So what happens, mate?
So I ended up getting so enamored by him that I ended up spending then all my holidays from university with him, living in India as a monk. So I would do my university term, and then half my summer would be spent interning at a corporate organization. So I'd be going out to bars and steakhouses after work and being in a corporate environment. And then for the rest of the summer holiday, spending it living as a monk in India with him because I was so fascinated by what he'd learned. And so I always describe it as almost like my first time I tested both the worlds against each other of living a very materially fruitful life versus a very spiritual life. And, you know, I was, and I still am, but same person with the same desires. But I was testing. I really wanted to see whether what he practiced worked and would it work for someone like me. And a lot of people around me were just like, Jay, you're not a monk. Like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you wasting time being spiritual? But I was just like, look, if he has something that I don't know about yet, I need to experience it and test it out.
I'm writing about mentorship, like now that book is out, and I talk about the point of mentorship is that you see through others something that you can't quite understand, that you're not going to realize in yourself unless they sort of show you where it is, that they can hold something for you that you yourself can't hold. So obviously this man is the first mentor you had, the first guru?
Yeah, I feel he was like the first male role model I had as well. Like someone that I really looked up to and thought, oh wow, this man knows what he's doing. And his demeanor and his charisma and his communication and everything that he'd developed became a big part of the identity that I felt fascinated by.
Sometimes when I feel like I meet someone that's all holy in that, I don't feel like I can be blunt about, listen, I'm thinking about sex the whole time, I'm looking at porn, I don't feel like I can be that candid.
Right.
Did you feel that you could be?
I could with him because I feel like he wasn't like the old wise sage. He was still, when I met him, so now he's 40 to 45. So when I met him 13 years ago, he was like 30 years old, 33.
He's like a young guy.
So he's fairly young, and he dedicated his life since he was 21, 22 when he finished at university. So he'd been doing it for like 10, 12, 15 years already by the age of 33 or whatever he was when I met him. So he was still accessible, and he was also very real. And he was also just much more accessible in that way. I think if it was someone who was 60 or 70, then I would have felt a lot more uncomfortable.
Yeah, when people see, I mean, I'm fascinated by, by people that have assumed a religious identity. Not that we don't all assume identity, not even me in my sort of casual clothes that I'm wearing now. It's a type of identity. I recognize that. But both of us, we share an important friend, Radhanath Swami, who's been on this podcast, who's a great teacher and mentor, also in the Krishna consciousness movement, which I'm guessing is what your father got into. Is that right? That was your first. So what, you were going down back to Devanta Manor and hooking up with all that, and the Krishna consciousness movement, if you've heard of it, probably because George Harrison was into it, the Beatles were into it as a whole for a while, and like George Harrison's like sort of stayed a devotee for all of his life. and it sort of looks like it's near kind of, I guess, it's where you're from, Watford, and it's a sort of a big sort of spiritualist movement in this country and around the world. So that was like, is that still, do you resist defining yourself by a particular religious tradition because you feel like it prevents other people from having access to what you're saying?
Yeah, I personally also, having become I feel like I've become even more of a seeker since being involved. And that's opened me up to alternative ideas, alternative ways of thinking, learning from all different traditions wherever I can. And I think that's a really important part. I think the challenge with being a immature seeker, in my definition of it, is you find something, it sounds cool, and you go, that's it, there's nothing else. And then a real seeker goes, well, that is it, but how can everything else even enhance this and make this even greater for me, if this is where my faith is or this is where my belief system is? So I'm someone who genuinely loves learning from people from all different walks of life and backgrounds, because I feel if I was presented with a deeper, more meaningful philosophy and life structure, I would adopt it. That's why, because I'm open to that.
It's the challenge that we all face in a sense, because I'm myself resistant to precluding other religious ideologies. I don't want to sort of be tacitly saying, people that are Muslim are wrong, or people that are Christian are wrong, or Jewish or Buddhist or whatever, because like you imply with your early interactions with great texts, the thing that's fascinating about them is they're all saying we're all one, be kind to one another. Totally. Like the things that I feel like the things that are the same about the great religions are the most important things, and the things that are different, we should look at where those things might be cultural inflections or historically relevant or pertinent to that time. Like, probably not best to eat that kind of meat at that time. Best not to wash your hands in that kind of way at that time. Probably best not to involve yourself in them sexual practices at that time. Like a lot of these things are sort of just cultural.
Totally. And the cultural traditional creations and ideologies that evolved from people coming up with stuff. And I completely agree with you. I think the universal, and it's true, right? Like,
we're some people, we've come up with some stuff.
I genuinely feel like that. I think about that with every rule I ever hear. I'm just like, who came up with that? Like, who came up with the ideology we work 5 days a week and have 2 days off? I don't know who ever came up with that.
The weekend apparently was quite recently achieved through the trade union movement. Someone told me it wasn't that long ago you weren't even allowed that.
Right.
And then preceded that, there was serfs and slaves and stuff. And you're quite right. I mean, so you're obviously, like me, are quite optimistic about the possibility of change. But also, I think, like me, you sense that it's going to come from a spiritual tradition. Like, I think people would be surprised that you and I prayed before we did this podcast. That's like, I don't imagine that happens in a lot of, like, we're both sort of look on the surface like secular men. We don't look like people that go around praying and stuff openly. But it's an interesting thing, isn't it, to have those kind of interactions?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember you were meditating before Joe Rogan podcast too. When I saw that video. And I saw you do that. I remember Joe Rogan asking you why you did that and what you were doing. And I just think that we are trying to intentionally and consciously do the activities we are. And I think being limited by what you wear or how you dress and defining yourself in a certain category, if that's going to alienate people or make what you're saying less accessible, and also just being ourselves, I think any sorts of dress or any sort of, whether it be dress or appearance or any of that, if it's taking you away from who you actually are and how you like expressing yourself, then that kind of contradicts being able to be authentic and being real. So I feel more authentic wearing this than I did wearing my robes when I was a monk. Did
you have a shaved head when
you
was a monk?
Yes, I did. The
first time, pictures of it?
I do.
Well, we met like that,
I do. Yeah, the first time we ever met.
You were monked up?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, the first time. But I have two pictures because everyone always asks me, did you document your journey? And I'm like, well, we didn't take selfies when we were monks. So I wasn't even allowed a smartphone. So it's interesting how I have two pictures. I have two pictures that are on the internet. You can find them anywhere. Yeah.
In full monk gear.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Not at all. Yeah. I'm fascinated by that because I'm curious. I often feel like when my own life feels, bless you, unfulfilling, I feel like is that what I should be doing? Now, like, it's a little late now. I've got a wife and 2 children, so that's not my journey no more. But because hedonism hasn't worked, because excess hasn't worked, I feel like, and like because the people I aspire to and I'm attracted to are mostly people that have become like lived what would be considered extreme spiritual lives in the context of our time, but probably aren't extreme spiritual lives, given that the reality of all of us is we spend all our time in our bloody head thinking, worrying, getting anxious, making judgments, afraid. And if you don't make dealing with that your priority, then it doesn't matter if you've got a nice car or nothing, you're not going to enjoy it anyway.
Totally.
Even more simple things like that, like going on a walk. I go on walks and I'm not even looking at anything.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a tree. I'm just like worrying or thinking about, I'll probably look at porn when I get in.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm not like present for the walk, you know? So like, okay, let's get back to your deal, mate. Now, like, well, some of the other times we've been talking, like, let's get down to some nuts and bolts. Your practice now, you don't swear. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm impressed
I haven't sworn since I was 16 or something like that.
Why?
Well, I really believe that everything we say, that beautiful thought from Gandhi where he said that when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in line, then you'll experience harmony. And I've really taken that to heart, and it's this powerful spiritual principle, and it really means a lot to me.
What you think, what you say,
and what you do are aligned. And so for me, any form of language, any form of your emotional vocabulary is building your mental reality. And I think people forget that their vocabulary is defining their life. You are creating your life on a daily basis by the words you use. So for me, and I'm not saying that I feel that way about everyone else, I'm saying that's how I feel about that word. Someone may say, oh, when I say a swear word, it makes me laugh. For me, it doesn't. That I would only swear when I felt bad and I felt something negative towards something. So for me, that had negative emotions, negative connotations, and negative intention attached to it. So I wanted to remove anything from my vocabulary that I felt was negative. So even as simple as, and I've done this very recently, but it's changed my life, instead of me saying I'm busy or it's been a busy week, I say I'm having a productive week. And I feel different when I go to bed, just by that simple change. I go to bed thinking, yeah, I've had a really productive day today, rather than going, God, I had a busy day today. Like, I don't want to wake up tomorrow. I'm going to have a busy day tomorrow. And so that simple emotional vocabulary change has just catapulted my mind into feeling excited and enthusiastic all the time.
So in a sense, you see your like consciousness as a malleable kind of computer, and the coding that you put in is going to have behavioural and actual consequences. I like that, mate. What about the other thing? You meditate and chant for 2 hours a day. Is that right?
Yes.
That's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot, but you know,
what time are you getting up?
I get up at about 5:30 every day, 6, so not that early.
Not like Mark Wahlberg. He's up at 4 o'clock doing push-ups.
No, I can do that. I like my sleep.
Me
and I feel
too.
sleep's important for the brain. Sleep's important for my life.
I love it in there.
Yeah, so do I. I love sleep. It's great for my creativity. I couldn't sleep any less, so I try and sleep 8.5 hours a night too. So I just try and sleep earlier.
I'd sleep more if I could.
So would I.
I'd like 16 to 18 hours.
Do your kids wake you?
They're not having that. They won't let me. Like, they're in the room all the time. The dog getting on the bed now. It's chaos. What happened is, because you are manifesting your reality, you're clearly right about that, Jay. And what I did is I thought, oh, I'm half lonely. Well, all right. Careful what you wish for. Now there's bloody dogs and cats and babies. Every single surface is covered in poo or hair. It's absolute madness in there.
Oh no. Well, there you go.
So you've developed. So you've, after your experience of becoming a monk, you have extracted some of these practices. Why did you stop being a monk?
2 things. One was a self-awareness piece of I came to realizing that I was quite rebellious and independent even as a monk. A lot of part of a monk's life is conforming and accepting authority and following a path. And those are all beautiful things for people who like those things. For me, it was a great training ground and a great system of giving me abilities and skills and habits that I didn't have before. But then I really felt a deep calling in my heart to want to share this in a specific way. So I kind of feel dragged to do what I do now because it's so deeply in me to want to make things relevant, non-sectarian, universal, and accepting of all truths and paths. It's just there, and I can't ignore it. And I got to a point in my monk life where I just felt I can't ignore this desire to want to go and spread this wisdom and insight in a way, independently, in a way that I feel will work and help people, you know, from an impact point of view. And so that was a big part of it. And the second part of it was I'd literally experimented with everything with my health, even as a monk. And I tried week-long fasts and I'd pushed myself without sleep. I used to sleep like 4 to 6 hours a night. And I got to a point where I was like, I need to take care of my health. I need to make my health a priority because I was so fascinated about mastering the mind that I almost neglected the needs of the body. And I can definitely say that I got to incredible places with my mind, but at the expense of sacrificing my caretaking of my body. And I felt I wanted to go back and do both of them together.
Would you ever take ayahuasca or DMT or any of those things?
So I did ayahuasca before it was cool. So I did it when I was like 17 or whatever it was. And that time
Where?
it wasn't. At that time I did it in Costa Rica, I think it was. At that time, yeah. And it wasn't cool then. It wasn't trendy. I tried it out. I thought it was awesome. But this is the interesting bit. So a lot of people ask me that question, and I read this awesome book recently called Gary Weber, PhD, who wrote a book called Beyond Thought. And there they measured across a study the feelings of pleasure across sex, psychedelics, and the non-dual state. And they found that, let me get this right because I don't want to say it wrong. Gary Weber, when they ranked the pleasure potential and the pleasure experience from each of these three, sexual orgasm ranked at 8, psychedelics ranked at 9.5, and the non-dual state, or what Taoists would call something different, Buddhists would call something different, Krishna consciousness, whatever you want to name it, that was ranked as 10 out of 10. So the actual, even scientifically proven version of experiencing pleasure, the highest form was through meditation, and highest form was through reaching a non-dual state. So for me, my thoughts on this is, I'm not against it. I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't stop anyone from doing it. My thing is, anything that happens from an external item or something that's induced from something external never feels like you earned it. It never feels like you got there yourself. And hence you become a dependent person on that experience. Whereas when you've built something, it's your experience to go back to at any point. And the thing I love about that is that there's this awesome part in this movie called Limitless, where Robert De Niro is talking to Bradley Cooper, and Bradley Cooper's taking a pill to be limitless. And Robert De Niro goes, you know what? I know you've taken something. I know you think you're smarter than you are, but because you haven't worked for it, you don't know how to use it. And therefore you will fall down, therefore you will fail. And it's such an interesting, and I feel the same way, that any experience that's coming from anything external, we will feel insecure when we don't have it. Whereas when you've meditated and you've really worked hard at building those experiences and that discipline and going deep, you can access that at any point in your life. And that's the beauty of doing it yourself, to get there yourself.
That's good. And I see why why you cited Stoicism as one of your interests or formative philosophical influences, because there is a degree of asceticism and denial in that, and that denial is not meant to be self-punishing or self-flagellating, but actually a way of accessing a truth that, as you have wonderfully described, not dependent on external coordinates or stimulation of any kind. I suppose because I'm lucky enough to be in recovery, so I don't drink, don't take drugs one day at a time, and have to be very mindful about my connection to external stimulation. I've sort of been shown that. I've been shown the truth of what you've just said. But because the hunger for in pleasure is its facsimile, pleasure is its shadow, pleasure is its imitation. But the thing, I love God in a kind of a way that's sort of sometimes quite savage, like I must have this now, and I become sort of angry about the material world, and I become angry about the illusion. But we are in this body. We're in this body for a reason. We've obviously got something to learn, something to do, something to, like these things have got to coalesce. We've got to make sense of it. Like when you tell me that thing, I watch like lots of videos about people doing DMT and ayahuasca. I get off on it because I like the psychedelics. I like the vividness. I like the color. But like I look at those books you look at too, and the Bhagavad Gita, and when you hear those stories about Krishna and snakes, and there's colors and there's internal dimensions and people are disappearing, these are beautiful. There's battlefields with gods on and serpents and gold and chariots. I mean, it's, for me, these great books are describing something that is accessible through human consciousness. And I would agree with you that the point, isn't it, that you want to, that if someone was to put you in a room, the less things you would have to take in that room with you, the better. Well, I'm going to need my wife, I'm going to need my kids, you're going to have to bring me some heroin, I'm going to need some chocolate hobnobs, bring my PlayStation, bring and Red Redemption too.
Bring those cookies.
More cookies than that. I want your cookies as well. Those are my cookies. All right, well, I'm keeping mine as well.
Yeah, it's true. And that's, I'm so glad that it makes me feel, as much as I love to have challenging thought and alternative opinions in my life too. I don't love being around people who all agree with me. But sitting with you here, having had very different experiences in life, coming from very different backgrounds, but to come to somewhat of the same thoughts and ideas, or aligned at least, it gives me great confidence. And it makes me feel extremely happy, because I feel like I try my best to second guess, question myself, really dive deeper into these truths. And what you said about being alone is really interesting, because this one of my favorite studies, I have to mention it because it aligns so well with what you said. They asked a group of people if they could pay them any amount to give themselves an electric shock, would they do it? These people said no. These people were then put into a room for 15 minutes and said, you can either be alone with your thoughts for 15 minutes or give yourselves an electric shock. And 21% of women gave themselves an electric shock, and about 63% of men gave themselves an electric shock, because people just don't want to be alone with their thoughts.
Well, I'd like to stay alone with the electric shocks. Just leave me alone with my shocks. Oh God. Oh, another one. Yeah, give me those nodes. I'll attach it where I want. Mind your own business.
Take it with you.
No, you're quite right. Now, what do you think you're tapping into with the success of your online broadcasting? What do you think it is?
So first of all, I just want to say that I feel extremely grateful and humbled by all the success that has been received online, because when I started making videos, I've been teaching these principles and studying them and learning them for the past 13 years of my life. And I was teaching in universities and teaching in schools and teaching at corporate companies, etc. I was trying to share what I learned. But I started making videos in 2016 without a hope of where they would go, and just wanted to make wisdom accessible, make it viral, and make it entertaining, and make it something that didn't feel like a chore to listen to or watch, make it something that was easily shareable. Because I always struggled with talking about these topics to people who didn't know about them. I was like, how do you get someone who's never thought about these ideas to start thinking about them, talking about them, and sharing them? And I had no idea where the videos would go. So the fact that they've received an incredible number of views, etc., is just extremely humbling for me, and I feel grateful for it. And I think it comes from a place of people searching for new thoughts, ideas, alternative methods of living online, because they're not finding them in their friends, they're not finding them in their communities, they're not finding them in their families. So people are naturally turning to online to build new communities. And you have a community that loves the direction you've been taking online. And I think that's what the online world allows us to do, connect internationally with millions and billions of people. So for me, there's one thing is the need of people looking for new thought that they can't find in their homes, etc. The second thing I believe is that we live in a culture where you literally see the same thing everywhere. So you look at a newsstand, there's a headline. You go onto the news website, there's a headline. You turn on the news, it's the same headline. And I think people are tired of just finding the same things being broadcasted to them in different ways everywhere. And sometimes you can pick up a paper or even read a website for 3 days and it's exactly the same story, just been spun in 4 different ways. I think people aren't getting any satisfaction or fulfillment from just reading negative news or news. And they're looking for other answers.
What do you think about politics?
So my take on politics is just and actually I can't quote who, but I met a very interesting man recently, extremely political his whole life, been very successful in writing the speeches of some of the greatest politicians, had an amazing dinner with him, and he said to me that he doesn't feel, and it beats him up inside, he doesn't feel that politics is going to bring about the changes that humanity needs, and he thinks it's going to come from spirituality, which for me was huge, because this man is a politician through and through. And so for me, politics is somewhere where I don't really feel confident and comfortable to talk too much, because I don't feel well versed in it. It's not my area of expertise. It's not my area of genius, but it is a space that I feel that people need to stand up for their beliefs. People need more integrity in what they believe in and follow up on what they're sharing. But in terms of how it affects people, that's the part that worries me the most. That ultimately just picking out a few tweets and turning that into news, in my opinion, that isn't news. That's just getting fascinated with a little piece of distraction.
It was always assumed that like the kind of content that people wanted online was a kind of a reflection of what's happening more broadly in the commercial and broadcasting realm, like, fast things that lead to titillating or stimulating content around celebrity or sex or whatever. And of course that's true, because that is an aspect of who we are, so it'll be reflected in any medium. But also people are interested in going deeper. I feel like what you said there about spirituality and politics is true, because in a way the sense for me is that politics is, as we understand it now, and it's a very broad subject. It's almost sort of laughed at myself saying, what do you think about politics? Because it's such a sort of big question. Do you like politics? Do you like colours? But what I feel is that politics is tied to a kind of like, sort of ideas such as nationhood, ethnicity, power, economics, all of which are kind of what the truths of them are concealed. Like when you said just there that you'll read the same story repackaged, it feels to me that what's happening, whether deliberately or otherwise, the options and alternatives that we're being presented with within the framework. Take, for example, some of the most binary issues that define literally our time right now: Brexit, Trump, ethno-nationalism, the rise of the right. Like, these things are, I feel like, well, why just this or that? Why just this or that? Neither of these views represent what I want.
Totally.
Neither of these things are saying, oneness, kindness, love. You're sort of told that those things are all wishy-washy claptrap that don't belong in the world. But people actually now, we're starting to intuit and indeed experience that, no, actually that's the most important stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the answer is in the paradoxes. I don't think the answer is in the blacks and whites. There's so much more grey, and it's harder to explore grey. And that's why we struggle. That's why we try and make it so separate and distinct and divided, because it's easier to process for the human mind. We love boxes and separation. And same with countries and cities and towns and football and sports. And then, I know we both like football, but even that kind of the dividing element of it, of putting everything in a box, allows us to assimilate it better, but it doesn't necessarily create the best experience.
You're right, I think, Jay, and perhaps it's to do with what you said before about language and the kind of language you use with yourself, that you have to make a decision of whether to say I've had a productive day or I've had a busy day.
Or a hectic day.
Right, how you sort of view your own life. And so systems are kind of necessary for human beings to function in the world. So something as simple as a football match with 11 members on each team for 90 minutes, all right, I can understand that. I get it. Now, mate, where do you see your evolving role? I want to talk to you about your intentions. I want to talk to you about your personal life, and do you see it as a separate thing that you protect? So you're married and stuff.
Yeah,
you're not
married.
Precious about that.
No, I can talk about
Your wife looks a bit like you, don't she?
Yeah, we get that all the time.
Vain,
No.
the pair of you? Vain people
we
marrying themselves.
I remember seeing on Channel 4 a show ages ago. I can't remember. I literally cannot remember. But it talked about how people end up marrying people who look like themselves because we're so obsessed with ourselves. And
something about this hairy guy I like.
Literally. And so anyway, yeah, my wife's incredible. She's amazing. We met around 5 years ago. We got married 2 years ago.
Where and what was it like?
So we met in London. We met in London. She actually used to come to a lot of my sessions that I used to teach on meditation and philosophy. And so it was awesome that she was interested, very much keen on learning more. She's now officially a better meditator than I am. She wakes up earlier than me. She meditates better than me, longer than me. She's Are you chanting, or tell me what type of meditation you're doing? So I do everything from breath work, visualization, and mantra. Those are my 3 key practices.
So how do you talk me through that 2 hours?
Yeah, sure. So breath work for me is really about resyncing.
What's the proper word for that?
Vipassana? Yeah. So yeah, for me breathwork's really important, because I really feel that we experience one of 2 things. We're either experiencing our mind ahead of our body. So everyone's had that experience where their mind's racing and the body's like, I'm just tired, put me back in bed. Or we experience the other extreme, which is the mind's feeling really tired and the body's having to rush around. So the mind's like, give me a break. But the body's like, no, but I need to do this and this. And so for me, breath work really realigns my mind and my body in the morning and brings it back together. Because when I wake up, I can be really creative sometimes. Be like, oh my God, I've got a million ideas of videos I want to make. And I'm like, no, look, just calm down. The body's not ready yet. Or you wake up and if you do, which I've really avoid now, but if you do look at your phone first thing, got all these messages coming in, your mind has to go from 0 to 100 miles per hour in 2 seconds, literally like the fastest car in the world. And the body's just like, oh, look, just give me a break. I just woke up. And so for me, Vipassana and breath work just allows me to align my body and mind. So that's why I do it.
So what, you just follow the breath?
So what I do is I count my breath inwards and outwards to be at the same time. So if you're ever feeling like your mind or body are ahead of each other, if you breathe in for the same amount of time as you breathe out, and count the numbers in your head and visualize
Well, like
them.
for 5 or something.
Yeah, 4 is usually the number that we can do. If you can, when you practice more, you'll do 7 and maybe do 11. But most of us can't even breathe in because we're shallow breathers. So being able to breathe in for a count of 4 and breathe out. We can do it now if you want.
Yeah, I'm doing it. This is good broadcasting. Just imagine someone playing snooker or yourself swimming in
Or golf.
limitless oceans. Yeah, golf. My wife's dad's golf. You can't disc golf, Jay.
Oh, sorry.
Otherwise the missus.
Oh, sorry. I shouldn't have done that, didn't I? Sorry, Laura. Sorry. I'm so sorry. But yeah.
Sorry, Bernard. He won't be listening to this. He thinks I'm a bloody maniac.
That's lucky for me. But then visualization. I am such a huge fan of visualization.
Go on, tell us. I like that as well because it's vivid. Go on.
The first time I started hearing about visualization was when I realized that David Beckham visualized free kicks before he took them. Lewis Hamilton visualized the racetrack before he races.
He visualizes it, does
he?
He
visualizes himself driving the car on that racetrack because he knows what the track looks like, obviously. So he's visualizing how he's taking that bend, how he's taking each part of the car, etc. And same with Beckham taking free kicks. And when I started thinking about it, I thought, oh wow, that's pretty cool. And that was the first time I'd come across it. And for me, it wasn't visualization as a meditation then. I just thought, this is cool. Here are some cool people doing it. And then I started to do it before I go on stage when I'm speaking at an event. I'll visualize myself walking onto stage. I'll visualize myself saying the first thing. So whenever I'm doing something that's pressureful or anything that I feel stressed towards, I visualize myself doing it the way I want to first, which almost reduces the experience when you actually go out there. Because you've lived that life once. The next time you walk out there, you've taken away the stress and the anxiety.
Even if it wasn't a performance thing or a high level thing such as Lewis Hamilton, would you recommend it? Say you have to have a conversation with someone.
Totally. If you've got to have a conversation with someone that's really challenging, observe and visualize yourself saying what you need to say, visualize yourself in their seat, listening to you, and then visualize yourself as an observer too.
Is this what you're doing in the morning? You're doing this breath, and then you've got to visualise the whole day.
No.
It'll be bedtime.
Visualising something.
And I sit here doing nothing, so pretending.
Breathwork takes like 4 minutes, 8 minutes. Yeah, breathwork's not long. It's a super short part of the process.
Cool. Well, that just gets you in alignment.
Totally. That helps me because when I meditate, otherwise on mantra, my mind just goes everywhere because I've got so many ideas, and then I know what my to-do list is, etc. We all have that, and that's what I feel is people's biggest struggle with meditation, is that you need something to prepare you before you meditate. It's like when you cook, you need to first chop the vegetables and gather all the stuff before you chuck it in a pan.
You're right. Right, I'm writing that down.
Sorry,
as well.
You know what I mean.
Don't just tip it all in the pan. That's why my casseroles are ridiculous. So you lay out the ingredients, you chop and you weigh, and even in either sense. And then so you do 4 minutes of the breathing. Yeah. Then what are you doing in your visualization? Is it bespoke depending on what day you've got?
Yeah, it depends on the day. Yeah, it depends on the day. Sometimes I'll take that out.
Do you not like to trust our Lord? Like I sometimes just go, sometimes I go, Lord, this is you, mate, because I don't know what's going to happen here. Yeah. But I do that quite a lot.
I do that on the day, at the moment when I feel it. Of course I do. I 100% do that. But I do feel that it's my responsibility to get my intentions right. And so one of my biggest visualizations that I do in the morning is I believe that good intentions in our life are seeds and bad intentions are weeds. And so
seeds and weeds system.
Seeds and weeds.
Good,
and every single day.
Why he's getting the followers. He's going to get the likes with the seeds and weeds. That's very Snoop.
It's very Snoop.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So okay. Different seeds and different weeds.
Different seeds. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Thanks, mate. Go on.
Yeah. So I was saying, so what I do is I reflect on my intentions visually every day. And I think about how many deals am I taking just because they make me money, or how many videos am I making just because they get me views, or how much stuff am I doing just for the vanity or just for the fame or success, or what I think is going to be good for me, like financially, economically, like how the default mind is set up to think about security as opposed to love and compassion and wanting to change the world and wanting to make a different place. And I'm constantly battling with the two. So what I'll do every day is I'll reflect on my intentions. I'll reflect on the deals I've just signed. I'll reflect on things I'm being offered. And I'll literally look at each offer, deal, whatever it is, each item of thought. And I'll say, is that a seed or a weed? And if it's a weed, I'll pluck it out. I'll literally visualize myself plucking it out of the garden of my mind and pulling it out and taking it out. And if it's a seed, then I'll water it And I'll say, okay, I want that to grow because I am doing that for the right intention. And that practice has really helped me.
What is your barometer by which I love this seaweed system.
Right.
I like it. It should be a game show. It'd be good, wouldn't it? It'd be a good game show.
If you could look in people's minds. If you could project people's minds into a
We're going to have to
screen.
rely on them, to be honest.
Yeah.
Or
That's
perhaps
not
we
gonna
bring
work.
back the electric shock.
Lie detectors,
Oi, tell the
electric
truth,
shock.
that was a weed. No, it's a seed. All right, it was a weed. So I like that. That's really good.
Yeah.
But what is the barometer
Yeah.
for evaluating, Jay?
So for me, I usually write down each option that I have in life. And I think we all have different options in life. And then I'll place a word above it that feels like the right emotion. So either it can be fame. I could be doing something just because of ego and fame. I could be doing something out of love. I could be doing something for money and stability. I could be doing something for inspiration and passion. So I try and define why. It's defining that why, that intention behind it. Like, why would I take that extra flight off to Singapore? Oh, because I'm going to make X amount of money, right? Like, and literally when you look at your life
Weed.
like that, there you go. And then I'd be like, okay, that's a weed. Now, can I transform it into a seed? Is there a way for me to make it more intentional, purposeful, and conscious? If I can, that's amazing. I'll do that. But if I can't, I need to stop taking things like that into my life. And now I understand, for anyone listening, there are times in our life where money has to be the motivator because we need security, we need stability. But when you do it intentionally, at least then you don't expect that thing to bring you the greatest happiness because you know what purpose it's serving in your life. So I know a lot of people who'd love to quit their jobs and live their passion. But I'm like, no, but you know why. If you know why you're doing the job you're doing, you won't expect it to make you happy. You'll know what it serves, right? What role it serves in your life.
One of my mentors goes, it's a quote, I think it's George Bernard Shaw, a gentleman is never unintentionally rude. So like if you're rude to someone, it's because it's like, I needed to slay you. And other than that, you are not rude to people. But there may be times, as you say, this is. I see Amma once, she was doing that sort of, I guess, kirtan. It was at her thing. Amma the hugging saint, as Jay has just gestured, in case you don't know. I was at her kirtan. It was New Year's Eve. There's thousands of people there. Amma's going in and out of Kali states of consciousness. Her eyes are going white. It's intense and mental. She's like a mentor of mine and all. There's a moment where someone, I guess, is playing a keyboard type thing, and it's like she thinks it's, I guess she don't like it, and she goes, "Oi, saw it in Malalalan." I don't know, Southern Indian dialect. She sort of coats this geezer off and tells him to sort his keyboard out. Not overly intense or anything, but she clearly cares that that's not right. And I, in that moment, think, oh, it's not that Amma doesn't discern or Amma doesn't care, because Amma, if you know anything about Amma, she's all about love. She's cuddling everyone. She's no judgment. But also we have to discern, so you're a young man. Our intentions are what? Our intentions are, as opposed to that do we not want to facilitate the creation of systems that mean that more people will have the options and choices and freedoms that we are working towards, communities based on these ideals, the replication of these systems? If so, how do we make room for the various traditions and backgrounds and beliefs that people might want to join us from?
I think the big thing for me is whatever's rewarded in society increases. Right, whatever you reward in society increases. And we were just talking about on the way up here that if someone sees something being rewarded, recognized, acknowledged, awarded, everyone goes, "Oh, I need to do that." It's like how podcasts started. Everyone saw podcasts working for one or two people, and everyone went, "Oh, I need to do a podcast." And the intention was just, "Oh, it seems to work." It wasn't the intent. I'm not saying everyone who started a podcast feels that way, but I'm just saying a high number of things start because someone sees someone doing something successful, being rewarded, recognized, maybe winning an award, and goes, "Oh, I need to jump on that bandwagon." When actually, if you took a step back and said, "Well, what's my deeper intention than just wanting to be one of the pack?"
Weed!
Weed.
Ow, that's a weed!
I'm going to hear your voice every time I do it. Every day now I'm going to hear. I need to hear you say seed, though. I've only heard weed so far.
God, well, keep working, Jay, because them seeds, I don't give them out willy-nilly. It's amazing I'm not swearing just out of respect for your system.
But you can.
What about that?
But you can. I've never...
Even though I like swear. No, but I took it on before because you can't. Because say, for example, N-word, it's gone. P-word, gone. You've got to take the ideas of the people... You know what I mean?
I appreciate that, but I don't also judge. That's definitely one of my biggest...
Not that I was going around N-worded, P-worded, like, by the way. All right. I am from Essex, but, we're not all the same. In fact, no one's like that in Essex. Yeah. So, all right. So, you recognise your intention in starting a podcast or whatever. So how are we going to use that to develop better systems?
I think it's what we reward. I think what we reward needs to change. So in an organization, what's rewarded is, like, if someone, for example, let's take an organization, it's smaller, it's easier to understand than looking at the whole planet. So if we look at an organization, if you reward people who work 18 hours a day, guess what? You're going to have a lot of people trying to work 18 hours a day and end up burnt out, depressed, with mental health, right? Like, that's just going to happen. Until you reward someone else or a different individual, a different group, teamwork mentality, you don't change the mentality of the majority of people that will just follow. And so that's the biggest thing. And it's a very easy starting point.
I like that you are resourcing a lot of your wisdom from scientific study. You've got a degree in behavioralism, haven't you?
Yeah, I loved behavior science and the mind growing up. That was my biggest fascination.
How do you deploy that in your work now as a spiritual teacher?
I think for me, I've always looked for the parallels between what I learned through spiritual traditions or ancient timeless wisdom and modern science. Like, that's always been my fascination, because I don't think they're contradictory. I actually think they're very much aligned. And I've only found that over and over and over again. There's a great book by a British author who actually writes for The Guardian. He wrote a book called Rethink. I interviewed him a couple of years back, by Stephen Poole. And his book literally talks about how every new idea we actually came up with it a long time ago, and how nothing is truly new. And so it's fascinating to see. He talks about how, like, driverless cars was an idea 300 years ago, but it was just that our technology now has caught up with our imagination. But our imagination has always been extremely high. Our creativity has always been extremely high. It's just technology has now caught up with it. So that intersection, which is what obviously we call singularity. But for me, it's more about how, if we look for the patterns, we'll find them. And something as basic as, today everyone's touting, be grateful when you wake up, be grateful in the morning, gratitude. And it's beautiful. I love it. When you look at that scientifically, it makes sense. There's tons of studies that show gratitude is better for you. It lowers your stress and it improves your happiness and meaning. I remember when I trained as a monk, one of the first things we did was we were told to wake up and be grateful to Mother Earth for everything she was going to provide us for the day. Like, what else is that apart from waking up with gratitude? So these ancient practices have been there from time immemorial, but now they're being scientifically validated. And I love that. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that's happening.
Yes, in a way, like, technology is like the materialization of potential wisdom, and that potential is always existing, just waiting for what we call or understand as time. Even sort of the internet and Wi-Fi, the sort of manifestation of the idea that consciousness can transmute and transfer and travel between individuals non-verbally with non-verbal codes.
Absolutely.
Jay, I've learned a lot from you. I think I'm going to learn a lot more from you over the years. Generally speaking, seed. The whole podcast has been a seed for me. You should check out all of Jay Shetty's social media presence. There's much to be learned from there. Brilliant videos, brilliant content. I hope we get to do more things together. I feel like we will.
I hope so too. Whenever you say that to me, I get very excited.
I wonder what it's going to be, Jay. I was thinking about it. Not that I wasn't listening. I was thinking about it a little bit while probably during your talking, because when I'm talking, I'm really focused. Seed. But perhaps we need to think of something where we can collude and collaborate with some people to create some content that's, sort of mutually beneficial. But we have to make sure that it's coming from exactly the right place and being communicated in exactly the right way.
Absolutely. Well, this is why I love what you do as well, because my focus has always been, how do we make education, what insight, wisdom, philosophy has always seen very education. How do you make education entertaining? I think you do it incredibly well through comedy and through philosophy and spirituality, and I'm trying to do the same thing in my own voice and my own reflections and realizations. And I really believe that if we can create more content for mainstream media, for TV, for production companies, etc., that really is based on intention and consciousness, but it's highly entertaining, that will change the world quicker than any course, any program, any weekend immersion retreat, because more people will always watch television and entertainment and Netflix than they will pick up a book. And
I think I sort of, it seems that you're right, but like what concerns me slightly about that is this. think of a film like The Matrix or a film like Avatar, right? Or that bloody Lego movie. Think of those three amazing films and how much more clear. Could you imagine a film making it more clear than The Matrix? You're asleep. Your energy is being used as a battery.
Yeah.
Wake up. Get out of the illusion. The machines are trying to turn you into a machine. Or Avatar. The material world, you can occupy. You are a different kind of consciousness occupying a body, but we have to return to nature. Or that Lego movie. There is a greater consciousness outside of your apparent understanding of the world. I mean, they've done it in the most perfect, accessible, populist ways. And what do? We eat some popcorn, we go home. So I feel that we've got to force people to do as I say.
And I think you're spot on. And that's where I believe that is level one. And then it's unpacking the story for people. It's then having the follow-up of where does that go? And I don't think that's ever been done before. The follow-up doesn't mean another movie. The follow-up means, okay, now there's a lot of people who are a community around this movie. How do we help that community unpack and live all of this stuff that they've just learned? But anyway, we'll figure it out. I haven't got it all figured out. I'm trying to figure it out.
We'll figure it out. Hopefully, what day is it? What is this? The podcast generally comes out on a Saturday. So if we can have it done by next Friday.
Yeah. Okay.
Seed.
Yeah, we'll put it up on the board outside.
Nice
with
one.
chalk.
Yeah, let's get that up there. We'll chalk that up. Revolution starts sort of about tea time.
I love it. But thank you, Russ. I'm so grateful, honestly, for you speaking to me and being here. And thank you so much.
We will do more. I feel the same gratitude. Cheers, mate.
Yeah, thank you, Russ.
Thank you. Thanks for watching this podcast and going all the way to the end of it. Would you so kind as to click the bell? It might not be there, because we're over there. And subscribing so that we can infiltrate your serenity and peace of mind with jangling bells and buzzes. Thank you.